Cadson Demak presents Type Design as a Collaborative Process, with particular reference to Indian and Thai scripts by Fiona Ross.
So it's a real honour to be invited here to participate in this wonderful conference and to speak amongst such brilliant company. And type design as a collaborative process is a topic that has occupied me for quite some time, partly in response to my research findings that question or even disprove some notable type histories, but also to redress the lack of credit afforded to some key contributors in this field. And it's my belief that an understanding of how type design processes have evolved and who has been involved in the process provides insight into the development of current type forms, which in turn helps inform design projects in answer to today's typographic needs. Now, given my background in languages, I'm going to discuss this topic in relation to scripts other than Latin, particularly with respect to Indian and Thai scripts. It's been noticeable that in comparison to the extensive records of printing establishments and their working practices, that histories have paid little attention to the processes of type design. And furthermore, historical accounts that have credited creators of type have tended to accord authorship to one, usually male, prominent person, such as John Baskerville or Eric Gill, whose typefaces bearing their name have long outlived them. However, research has shown that such luminaries have depended on others to execute their designs, although not necessarily to their complete satisfaction. And we do know that Baskerville relied on the punch cutter John Handy to interpret his vision, although he did cut many punches himself. Similarly, in the case of Asian scripts, whose users outnumber those of Latin, histories of print cultures have perhaps unwittingly failed to acknowledge all contributors to the textual design processes. And we know that printing in Asian scripts predates that in Latin, not only by means of xylography, as shown here, but also by movable type in East Asia. And movable metal type is known to have been successfully produced in Korea in the 13th century, so long before Gutenberg. However, many languages and their associated scripts, which may comprise many characters, have only achieved accurate typographic representation some centuries after the Latin script. To provide a little context, and some of this has been mentioned in other talks, the languages of South Asia alone are spoken by more than a quarter of the world's population, and most use scripts that are descendants of Brahmi, from which a number of Southeast Asian scripts also originate, including Tibetan, Thai, and Javanese. And it can be said that the largely undocumented transition of incised or handwritten letter forms to type forms for South Asian scripts has hardly been a straightforward process, and some scripts have yet to be rendered accurately in type. Well, history shows that the early types of many Brahmi-derived scripts were for the most part created by Europeans and later Americans, usually for missionary or political activities. And the first known book printed in an Indian script was a catechism in Tamil, printed in movable metal type, cast by Jesuits in 1577 at Goa, and a second edition shown here, with a set of improved types a year later. However, these awkwardly shaped early types do not relate directly to today's reading experience. And it can be said that the typographic development of Indian scripts did not begin in earnest until the 19th century. The year 1778 saw the use of the first successful font of Bengali types with the publication of a grammar of the Bengal language. Now, this publication is of particular interest not only for its approach to Indian script type design, which I've spoken of in other talks, but also on account of its reporting or misleading reporting of the type-making process. Because the preface to the grammar makes a claim that printing histories have repeated over the centuries that the Bengali types were cut and cast in India single-handedly by Charles Wilkins, who was to become printer to the Honourable Company's press, that is the East India Company,
And here he is in his later years, having been knighted for his various activities. Now, the preface states that Wilkins undertook, and I quote this, all the various occupations of the metallurgist, the engraver, the founder, and the printer. And other contemporary accounts also state that he had, I quote, no other assistance or advice than the directions for the several branches in Chambers' Cyclopedia. Well, such claims are simply not credible, not least on account of the sheer physical impossibility of just one person completing them within the time frame, even for a professional punch cutter, type founder, compositor, and printer, which Wilkins was not. Wilkins is also reputed to have achieved a similar feat in a shorter time in designing and casting a Nastaliq font, shown here, and I quote, by the labor of his own hand, from the metal in its crudest state, through all the different stages of engraving and founding. So even seemingly authoritative first-hand accounts of typographic ventures do need to be interrogated. And further research reveals that Wilkins was indeed aided by a skilled engraver, Joseph Shepherd, who assisted him, and I've highlighted the quote, from the first through the whole process of forming his Bengali and Persian fonts, for which that gentleman, that is Wilkins, assumed or received exclusive merit with its consequent profit or praise. Now, we also know that at some stage Wilkins was assisted by a local blacksmith, Panchana Karmakara, who went on to work for 40 years at the Serampore Mission Press, established by William Carey in the then Danish territory beyond Calcutta. And the constant lack of acknowledgement of assistance in typographic ventures is a regrettable practice that tends to pervade most type history. For instance, the output of the Serampore Mission Press was immense. Outreach rather than legibility was a priority. Between 1801 and 1832, the Mission Press is known to have published over 212,000 volumes in 40 languages, including Thai and Chinese. Now, the reliance of the missionaries on local assistance in translating, cutting, casting, composing, and printing is undisputed. However, the publications themselves give little credit even to the Indian translators. But this did not concern Carey, who received most of the credit himself. And this situation led in 1828 to a publication by the junior missionaries who deserted Serampore and founded the Calcutta Baptist Missionary Society and Press, a publication in which they commented on the credit accrued to the three senior missionaries, and I quote, whose praises were so loud and so often iterated that the labours of others equally indefatigable were yet deemed worthy of little notice, and their names never pronounced except in tones very subdued. And these Serampore deserters, who were skilled punch cutters and printers, engaged with Bengali writing masters such as Kalikumar Raya, and the resulting elegant and often experimental designs accorded with the scribal tradition that followed the stroke modulation of North Indian penmanship, which is the reverse of Latin, which Neil, who's sitting here, I'm glad to say, has demonstrated here. So from this point on, we see the gradual growth of indigenous type foundries or type founding activities attached to various presses in South Asia, such as this one established in 1869 at Mumbai by Javdi Dadaji, who founded the Nirnaya Saga Press that was renowned for its Sanskrit, Marathi, and Gujarati typography. And these foundries found solutions particularly suitable for Indian script type founding and typesetting. Now, clearly labor was shared, but it's really difficult to assess who made which decisions in the type making process that contributed to the final image. Because the designation and indeed profession type designer is relatively recent. So the late 19th century saw the mechanization of type-making practices alongside that of printing, which enabled the introduction of what was to become known as hot metal composition by such companies as Linotype and Monotype. And such industrial development saw a vast increase in the number of people involved in the design and production of processes. Yet the nature of the tasks, and therefore the skills required, changed. Type manufacturing companies established in-house type drawing offices to produce the technical drawings for punch-cutting production, specific to their equipment. And later, Eric Gill and others would criticize the interpretation of their letterform sketches by the Monotype type drawing office, which was staffed principally by women since its inception in 1910. And apparently those who made the working drawings, in most cases, never met the designers of the artwork. And the situation at Linotype would not have been dissimilar in the hot metal era. Well, commercial concerns drove the implementation of Asian scripts on hot metal typesetters, which promised unprecedented setting speeds. So here we witness international collaboration on ventures that were severely hampered by the limitations of machines never designed for scripts other than Latin. And the Linotype machine was favored for newspaper composition as what it produced could cope with the pressures of rotary printing. And here are some of the people instrumental in the development of hot metal Linotype Devanagari, and then also Bengali. But the driving force behind the development of Linotype Bengali was Suresh Chandra Majumdar in the 1930s, the then proprietor of the newspaper Ananda Bazar Patrika in Calcutta. Now, this first edition was hand-set and printed in red ink on pink paper in protest against British rule, which accords with Damien's comment about typography being a political act. Well, for the hot metal project, the Bengali project, it was agreed with those you've just seen that the letterforms would be designed in India, the patterns, punches, and matrices manufactured in America at Mergenthaler Linotype Company, and the project coordinated in England. Well, inevitably, the project was beset with problems, particularly on account of communication or miscommunication or even misinterpretation of the communication across these distances in those days. Letters between countries averaged about 1 month to travel from one to the other. The project was realized in 1935 to a mixed reception. As you can see, the Linotype couldn't kern. However, it did enable the rapid and widespread dissemination of information. Now, some newspapers named its artist as Sushil Kumar Bhattacharya. Unfortunately, his name is not to be found in any of the Linotype records that I've been able to access. Regrettably, it was the long-held policy of some type manufacturers to only credit already celebrated designers. By this time, the keyboard had become crucial to the entire type design process, for it determined the number of characters and their sizing, as I've highlighted the comment in yellow here. Now, if we jump ahead to the digital era, we see the importance of this, that is, the importance of the keyboard, with the introduction of the phonetic keyboard for Indian scripts, in which I was involved, and that was first adopted by Ananda Bazar Patrika, known as ABP, for both Bengali and Devanagari composition. So at this stage, we now see the software engineer as the critical collaborator in the type design process. So the project for digital Linotype Bengali, underpinned by research, was achieved through collaboration, with input from the late Dr. Tarapada Mukherjee, a Bengali scholar, and my PhD supervisor, Tim Holloway, the talented designer who drew the finished artwork, and my colleagues in Linotype UK Drawing Office, who hand-cut the rubylith negatives that were scanned for digitization by the company Stempel AG in Germany. These are the days before desktop publishing, and I also need to mention the Linotype software programmers, also led by Dr. Mike Fellows and then Ismail Parek. Direct communication with the clients was crucial, which became increasingly swifter, particularly as we agreed on a terminology to use between ourselves. And the introduction of italics and then the facsimile machine were wonderful tools that helped speed up the process. So in the 1980s, airmail letters took about 2 weeks to reach India from the UK and vice versa. The result comprised a totally new typeface, as ABP were keen on innovation to raise the quality rather than adhering to old practices. And further projects ensued, also with Matthew Carter engaged with the Linotype Devanagari font development. These comprise the first digital South Asian fonts created during the 1980s and then for PostScript in the 90s at Linotype UK. In answer to one of the questions raised yesterday, I think, in Dan's session, we never had to start with a Latin design or ever undertake one. The priority was for the individual scripts in themselves. And of course, we benefited hugely from contact with our overseas colleagues, who were in constant contact with the end users. And I worked particularly closely with Bala, as he was called, shown on the top right of the top left image. Well, most of this work was considered innovative, with groundbreaking designs that were employed in many newspapers, such as Indian Express. Well, unfortunately, they can hardly be said to have acted as catalysts for further original designs. Plagiarism became easier to achieve and was rife. Linotype Bengali clones, variously called ABP Bengali or Vidyasagar type, appear everywhere, even on this building at the Kolkata Book Fair a couple of years ago. Two of our digital designs were for Thailand, which I visited for research and teaching purposes in the early 1980s. Remember that all font production for dedicated typesetting equipment had to be done in-house by the affiliated type manufacturing companies. So we're still here long before OpenType and programs like Glyphs. And one commission was a foundry type revival of a traditional looped tie style, shown here, for newspapers or magazines like National Geographic. So the characters must not occupy too much space per line. Much of this design work was undertaken by Georgie Surman, seen here working on another script. And a looped low contrast style followed, with Tim Holloway designing the bold weight. And Tim and I continued to collaborate on many projects after Linotype UK closed in 1996. And one of these projects was Adobe Tie. We'd already worked together on Adobe Arabic and Adobe Devanagari, now with John Hudson in Canada undertaking the font production. And our colleagues at Adobe who commissioned these were David Lemon and Thomas Finney. As was our wont, each of these were research-driven projects, and these are just two of the resources I had looked at for the tie. I saw a similar massage manuscript, but white lettering on black at the SAM Museum early this week. We collected much other material. Of course, Tim and I critiqued each other's work, and we were sending material and font files by dial-up internet from our landlines. So things have changed. The type design brief for Adobe Tie was for business use. So we had generous loops and counters that would be clearly visible on PDF forms, but that would also work well when printed. The Murti Classical Library of India series with Harvard University Press was another collaborative project. However, due to time constraints and your patience, I will quickly pass over this project, except to say that we have taken pains to document the design process. And it is important to us that the fonts in 8 languages with a Latin component can be downloaded free of charge, and also updated versions of these to suit contemporary needs and other languages are also available as Libra fonts. So I'd like to close by mentioning a recent branding and type design project that does exemplify current collaborative practices, which other talks have here discussed. Since the Linotype Bengali project that began in 1978, I have continued to co-design typefaces for ABP with the additional collaboration of Nilkash Kedrimayan in 2012. We're going to have to shine a light on him at the end of this. And Neil and I have continued over 12 years to design typefaces to afford different voices for the newspaper, some of which you can see here. And I actually have them because I was bringing them to the university earlier this week. During the COVID pandemic, we experienced a new type of collaborative project, instigated by a phone call I received from Arup Sakar of ABP. And this commission was for me and Neil to design the Indian script identity logos and then taglines for ABP's newly acquired network channels in collaboration with branding consultants, Saffron, based in Madrid. And this led to a separate commission for us to design accompanying Indian script typefaces for 7 languages in 6 scripts. They hadn't understood that the taglines weren't type, they were artwork, so we had to sort of explain that. The typefaces in 3 weights, each comprising an average of 500 characters, have since been completed by a team of 8 of us collaborating again across 3 continents in 6 different time zones and no in-person meetings throughout. So here is Neil in Goa and Fernando in Sao Paulo. T-shirt colour is entirely coincidental. Discussing with me in Gloucestershire the typeface that was to follow on from the Tamil logo shown here, and the initial characters Neil and I had designed for each script's typeface. This is a quick glimpse of the initial Tamil characters and later beta testing. The project was launched with a Bengali design in which we were assisted by Juan Bruce in December 2022. And since then, channels with different languages have followed. We do have to say that the typographic knowledge of the editors of the news channel is not quite the same level as that of the print newspaper, and it is very variable if you look online. The line with the orange background is a moving ticker tape line of text, which was really quite a challenging design task for these scripts. And here is just the Hindi Devanagari, whose typeface design was taken on by Vaibhav Singh. These are just screenshots. And naturally, Neil and I are documenting the design process, and we encourage this practice to leave behind an accurate record. So I'd like to leave you with 2 conclusions, if I may. So I will conclude now on a somewhat personal note. My academic research has focused on remediating a number of received type histories, while my design work has always been engaged in collaborative projects, shedding light on the often unseen hands who helped shape the type forms that still have resonance today is, I find, both insightful and inspirational, and also timely. I believe that understanding how type forms achieved their current guises, their current forms, enables informed decision-making in new and often challenging typographic ventures. And I do think that the pooling of skills in what is a naturally iterative design process can only enhance the quality of type designs that may serve the needs of diverse linguistic communities. I would also love to add one last thing. I'm very happy to find that the future is bright in this transdisciplinary field. I'm not only encouraged by the inspiring talks we've had here, but it was really heartening to witness how the young students on the excellent Comma course at Chulalongkorn University are so actively engaged in their work to enhance visual communication in so many new and interesting ways, and under the expert guidance of Jutamas and Anutin. Thank you very much.